Welcome to the Money Huddle, a podcast that explores financial topics for families and small business owners. Hosted by Michael Baker and Ross Marinell. All opinions expressed by Michael and Ross or any podcast guests are solely their own opinions and may not reflect the opinions of Planners Alliance. The podcast recording is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon for investment decisions. Clients of Planners Alliance may maintain positions in securities discussed on the program.
Welcome to the Money Huddle podcast, where we talk about all kinds of neat financial topics for parents, entrepreneurs, business owners, basically anybody that wants to get better making money decisions. I'm Michael Baker, and I'm here with Ross Marinell. Ross, what's up?
It's great to be here. How you doing today?
Doing awesome, buddy. Real quick, how was the holidays with the family?
It was good so far. We're about ready to hop on a flight, fly back to Indiana.
That's right.
Visit the parents. So we've got interesting times ahead. The girls are excited.
Awesome. Same here, man. We had a great time celebrating the holidays, celebrating Christmas. Now we're kind of in that weird zone where we're done with Christmas, but school hasn't started back yet. So every day is kind of, what are we doing today?
Be honest, you really want to get back to work.
Well, we are here today recording, aren't we? So anyway, I wanted to chat with you about something, and actually that gave me the idea for this show was Elizabeth and I, we had date night.
Okay.
The other night.
All right.
Went on a date night. We don't do that often enough, but we did. And earlier that day, Elizabeth and I, we were talking about something. We were having a conversation about college, specifically for my daughter Madeline, who's 5, and we got interrupted because we have 2 small children, so it's rare that we can have a full-on adult conversation.
Sure.
And I just said to her, "Hey, I'll finish talking to you about this later." She's like, "Okay." So, my wife, who is, got this keen memory. One of the first things that happens when we sit down at the dinner table, she goes, finish telling me what you were talking about earlier. And it was specifically about college planning for Madeline. So I said, well, basically here's my thoughts about college. And here's what was interesting. My wife has, I don't want to say polar opposite view for me about college planning.
Oh, that's interesting.
But we are not like living in the same parallel universe. What that means is, Ross and I, we deal with families a lot, planning for college, trying to figure out how to fund college. Not only that, we also see the effects of not having prepared well, in our view, for college, and where people are just loaded up with student loan debt and not figuring out how to get out of it. And one of the things that we've tried to implement with our families is something we call like smart college, where it's like, hey, what's the goal of going to school? Is it to have this amazing college experience, or is it to get you prepared so that you can go out to the workplace, be an independent adult, and get up and running on your own 2 feet as quickly as possible? Well, my wife was very, very in tune with the college experience and how important that could be.
Oh, that's interesting.
It was very interesting. It got for a tense moment at the dinner table. I won't lie. I kind of tensed up, and she's like, "Why are you getting so?" She was like, "Why are you so?" And I guess it's just we have become so passionate about, not paying more than you need to go to school, making a wise choice with where to go to school, even to the point of strategizing how to get there.
Well, in Elizabeth's defense, we do tend to think much more about the financial impact of going to college, and we've seen both sides, right? We've seen
absolutely
the poor college experience where you graduate late, you have more debt than you expected to have, and you're struggling to find a job. We've also seen the flip side, where you're graduating on time, you had an excellent experience, and you sort of hit the ground running. So I think in Elizabeth's defense, we do tend to think more about the financial impact of it versus the experience of just being at college, living on your own. I'm sure there is merit there. I'm not discounting it. But our brains are wired to tend to think about this financial impact.
No question. And she did not hesitate to point that out to me. She's like, I think you think about things, one way. And it is true. Like when we did start the conversation, it was in a way framed from, us as parents, how are we going to help our kids pay for college? And it kind of morphed into, where I'm speaking from the viewpoint of we got to help them pay for everything. And she's kind of thinking of like, well, they might get scholarships. They might, basically it was kind of like, well, we don't want to just tell them where they have to go. And I was like, no, that's not it at all. It's more of, hey, let's teach them as they go through school about, hey, finding out what's important to them and be looking for schools that reflect that. And she was thinking that I cared nothing about the experience. And I was like, no, that's not true. I want there to be a great experience. I just don't want the experience to be the number one thing we're looking for when it goes to school.
We don't want to extend the experience. We want it to be a 4-year experience. Right. So I do think there is something to what Elizabeth's point is, which is if you are comfortable in the right environment, studying something you're passionate about, you probably will graduate on time, which is ultimately what I think from a financial perspective, you're looking at. Can this be something where you're acquiring the life skills you need to go get a job right away, doing that in the most affordable fashion, which is graduating on time, and hopefully in a career or at least in a field of study that you have some passion about, that you are committed to it, and you're not changing your mind on what you want to study midstream.
Yeah, well, that's where she got me. She was like, well, what if they go and then halfway through they decide they want to change their major? And then she goes, isn't that what you did? Oh, she had me dead to rights, man. I was like, oh man, you know what? Touche. But, in my defense, in my humble defense, I was very, very fortunate. I had a lot of academic scholarships to go to school. So it's not like I was like, hey, mom and dad, hey, I decided that, I want to change and we need more money. So, but that should be thought about and carefully planned for in my view, because, let's face it, a lot of kids go to school, they get educated, and they end up going into the workforce, and they find themselves going down a career path, which is not what they studied in college.
I think that happens all the time.
Right.
But I think, too, the stakes are a little higher because we anchor the college experience. It's pretty easy to anchor that back to the experience that you had.
Right.
So I remember, when I graduated college, I'm looking at what a year tuition is at some of the most popular South Carolina state schools.
Right.
And we are approaching $30,000 a year when you look at tuition and fees, room and board, books and supplies, just the kind of all-in costs of college. And so it's a bigger commitment financially now than it ever was. And I think as parents of young children, we kind of think back, oh, well, I remember going to college. It costs a few $1,000s a year. If you extended that a year or two, you weren't necessarily creating a mountain of student loan debt. Whereas now, I just feel like the stakes are higher for these students that are going to pay maybe 3 to 4 times what the cost was, even 20 years ago.
Which is a beautiful segue, because I'm sitting here and looking at this report. J.P. Morgan has prepared a report called College Planning Essentials, Comprehensive Guide to Saving and Investing for College. And I'm looking at it, and we all in our view, in our business, we hear a lot about cost of living, things that are just getting outrageous. And one of the most common things that people talk about is healthcare, like how expensive it is to do anything. I mean, we just got a medical bill the other day for going to the doctor with one of our kids. And, we have great insurance. We're very fortunate. But I went in and I looked at the actual bill, and the visit, what the provider billed, was like $300 and something. Now that's not what we paid, but that was the starting point. And I said to Elizabeth, I said, oh my gosh, like who could pay that? Like if you needed to take your kid to this, specialist, if you will, that's just to walk in the door.
Right.
And so we hear about medical costs a ton. Well, this report is showing inflation. Like since 1982, medical costs have gone up 393% since 1982. College tuition, you want to hear this?
I'm ready.
College tuition, 776%.
Wow.
An average increase annually of 6.4%. So it is skyrocketed since the early 80s. And so let's think back to parents with teenagers, people that, even our age that went to college. It's a whole new ballgame as far as cost is concerned.
Right. So, and we've done a lot of digging into some of the reasons why, and I can't get beyond this, which is as the college tuition cost has exploded and risen almost every year. I would be curious to look back at the school's track records of cost increases, but what's also increased in lockstep with it, and that's the amount of student loans that have been borrowed. And as costs get more expensive, the student loan debt increases, and if you stick those charts side by side, it's pretty incredible how well they line up.
Yeah, it's crazy. And actually, on the very next page here, this is what I thought was just insane. So we've got some really close friends of ours who just had a brand new baby girl in December, right? And there's a chart on here. It says, hey, the projected cost of a 4-year college education based on their child's current age. So right now, if you've got a teenager, let's say you've got an 18-year-old getting ready to go to school for average, 4-year cost is projected to be right at $92,000. And that's including tuition and fees,
right?
Room and board, the whole bundle, not just what it takes to walk in the door and be enrolled. We're talking about like the whole bundle.
Right. That's
okay?
the all-in expense.
All in expense. For a private school, this is, to me, seems just insane. $209,000 and $84.
I don't doubt that that's the retail cost.
Sure.
Of those universities. I think as we'll talk through some of the strategies that we have to help people save a few bucks, I think we can see that cost, the reality of that come down a little bit.
So here's what's crazy. So I thought those numbers were crazy. So all the way on the very polar opposite end of the chart, there is a graphic that shows newborn, right?
Okay.
So I got kids, friends who just had a baby. She's brand new, not even a month old. Okay. Newborn, $221,667 for a public 4-year degree. Right?
That doesn't even seem fathomable.
Oh, you want to hear private? Private is $500,000, $503,186.
I'm speechless. You kind of realize the number's going to be insane. Now, there's certainly track record to believe that could happen, because if you look back at some of the tuition rates in the 90s, certainly when I went to school, it has exploded. Now, can online classes, technology, is there a different way to get the education that you need? Is there going to be some significant improvements over the next 15 years? I sure hope so, because I think it's going to be very hard for most families to be able to afford that. And it's a burden that even if you could borrow the student debt to go through a $200,000 education, I would not wish that on people to have to carry that burden early in your career, to not only have to provide for yourself, get the skills to get a job, maintain that job, and put your focus on it, but then have to try and grow into your lifestyle carrying that level of debt. It's a significant amount of money.
Oh, I don't disagree. And I think that was kind of going back to the conversation that Elizabeth and I were having. I'm constantly coming from the viewpoint of, okay, this is ultimately an investment, right? How do we, if you're borrowing for anything, borrowing for a home, borrowing, for an automobile or something, obviously you want a car that's going to be reliable. Some people buy cars because it makes them feel good and look good. But the ultimate point of having a vehicle is, can it serve the purposes that we need it to serve? And when I think about college, I'm thinking my approach is, are we picking a school that's going to enable us to find some field of study that once we have that, we can go out into the workplace, be very employable, and an upward mobility, right? Sure. Not just, hey, I'm going to go to this school because it's really an awesome school for this field of study, but then we look at the salary or income potential of that, vocation, and maybe the top earning potential is $45,000, period.
Right.
Not necessarily a great investment if it's going to cost me $80,000 in student loans to go work. That's how my brain gets around that.
Right. So one of the things we motivate people to really follow, especially for those students now looking at colleges, is this isn't an area where we want to settle.
Right.
Cast the widest net. Look at more schools than you may think. Okay, maybe you go into the process thinking, I'm going to look at 2 or 3 schools. I would encourage you to look at twice that amount or more. Visit colleges, get out there on campus, see what kind of experience you want. Now, some of our larger state schools, there's going to be 30,000 students with you. That might be the right place for some people to be, where they're comfortable being in a larger classroom. There also may be those students out there that would thrive in a smaller school.
Right.
So one of the big missions we have for those students getting ready to enter college and start this process is really look at a broader search, because one, we don't want the retail price of some of those private institutions to stick out. There's ways that you may be able to bring that cost down. It's really finding the right place where you think, one, you can get a degree and an education that's going to produce the right level of income for you.
Yeah.
And two, where you will be comfortable enough to really, like you said, thrive and kind of excel there.
Sure. No, I think what's one of the things that can be difficult for families, I think, is we're all kind of prone to what's going on now. It's really hard to think about 20 years from now, 15 years from now, 10 years from now. And what got us talking about the college thing in general was just how fast we feel like our kids are growing up. I mean, they're growing up so fast. Elizabeth made a comment, gosh, Madeline's going to be in first grade, next year. And it just seems like, wow, where'd the time go? And I know, hey, we're going to blink and she's going to be a junior in high school and we're going to be having these decisions. And so, one of the things I did a couple weeks ago was, at your behest, I with the market was melting down, I took some money and I invested some money. I opened up an investment account specifically for, my hope is that, it's the beginnings of, college funding for them. And it's something that I have a plan on how I'm going to attack it in the future, but I had just been, somewhat procrastinating on just getting started. And so what would your advice be for parents that are kind of in that same boat? They're like, gosh, I know I need to do something with this, but they kind of need that little extra kick in the pants just to get them going. What would you say to those
So
folks?
For our South Carolina listeners, I participate in the state-sponsored 529 plan, Future Scholar. It's a simple process. I believe you can apply online.
Yeah,
if you don't already have a 529 account. I would just get started. Even if you start with $50 a month in a contribution, get the process going and open the accounts and just pick a strategy and go. There's age banded strategies that make the investment management process pretty simple. It's not complex for most folks. There's not a significant amount of balance there when you get started. So, really breaking down the investment solutions may not be as important as just getting it funded and started. And just grab one of those age banded strategies for the time being.
Right.
But like you said, the window begins to close quickly.
Oh yeah.
And before long, you go, wow, we only have 8 or 9 years to really fund it. Even if it's not in a 529 plan, but you've earmarked maybe a non-retirement account. that you're just investing on your
Which
own.
is what I did.
Right. Yeah. So you didn't actually take advantage of the 529 plan, which that's okay. As long as it's non-retirement asset, meaning you can get access to it before age 59 and a half, you can have those withdrawals there available. That's fine. It's just getting started. And the amount that so think about this. We just said it's going to cost almost $90,000 for a 4-year public institution. So you might think I can't fund $90,000 in the time frame that I have. That's not the goal. I think the goal is to get as much as you can realistically save for college earmarked.
Right.
And you may end up having to take advantage of federal student loans, and hopefully your child will have an opportunity to acquire some scholarships from the state. There are some that should be available, with the right academics. So I think it's just get going.
Yeah.
And
Well, I think
don't be intimidated by the ultimate potential
Right.
investment.
Well, I think too, I mean, I'm a parent, I'm a dad, you're a dad, and I think that one of the things that's difficult. I mean, it's joked about a lot in sales trainings, that how good kids are at closing.
Right.
Kids are closers, man. Like my 2-year-old son, I mean, he gets me to do stuff all the time that I'm like not interested in, but he's relentless. And
No is the starting point
yes,
of the negotiation.
Exactly. They are just amazing at that. Fearless. They don't care that you just told them no, like dead in their face. They don't care. But my thinking of this is saving. Well, one is two things. Like one, we need to encourage people just to get into the habit of saving, saving for a goal. But number two is a lot of these schools, a lot of them, when you go into the financial aid office, the way that you afford to go to that school is loans. And a lot of those loans require mom and dad to sign them, to co-sign on some of these loans. And so it's not just like, hey, this is just your kids, your child's making a financial decision. It's like you also could be asked to make a financial commitment and go into debt as well. And that's what I'm trying to approach it from is, hey, there's ways that, the federal government has the Stafford loans where, your kid can go get some aid without needing mom and dad's signature. There's part-time work. There's, planning effectively and trying to figure out how to, pick the right schools and pay less than retail. There's all these different ways, but and if the mom and dad can have some savings to help supplement that, then that may prevent some of these more punitive loans being part of the equation, which I think is a win. What do you think?
I agree. I think there's 3 ways that you can help your child get through college. One is obviously you can save in advance. So that's the 15, 16, 17 years we have to start saving into, whether it's a 529 account or just a non-retirement account, that can help supplement some of that cost. The second is you may choose to have your child take on some federal student loan debt. There is a priority, I would say a pecking order of loans that should be considered, with the federal direct student loans being the first of those options because they have more favorable terms, they have lower costs,
Right.
They have a little bit lower rates than some of the other alternatives. And then third is, like you said, just kind of help integrating some of that cost into your monthly cash flow.
Yeah.
Now, for us, I will say,
Yeah.
graduated from the daycare
Right.
expense.
Oh yeah.
So
I know where you're going.
That is very much like funding. It feels a lot like paying for college or partially paying for college. It's a not insignificant amount of money. So for those listeners out there that have gotten their children through where like my wife and I both work, so you have a dual income household, daycare is a part of that equation. You have essentially experienced what how it can cost may be, when you go through college. And so I think we're very adept. We can absorb some of those costs just as they occur.
Right.
And I think it's that trifecta. So when I say get started with your investment account, you may look at that $90,000 number and think, well, maybe you want to save half of that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a more manageable goal than trying to save the full amount. That means your child's probably going to take on a little bit of student loan debt.
Right.
And you're probably going to have
part-time.
Right. They can get a job. They can work. They can offset some of their living expenses. Maybe they live at home or live off campus.
Live at home for a couple years. Yeah.
But I think it's the combination of those three things that can close the gap on that number, with the ultimate goal, like you hit it on the head. What we want to try and avoid is the punitive loans that are out there. Now, here's the challenge, and this is what really I think is a thorn in people's side. The federal direct student loan over the first 4 years, so hopefully you graduate in 4 years, you can only borrow $27,000 in federal direct student loans.
That's the Stafford loan.
That's
right?
Stafford loan.
Okay.
For the other loan programs that are out there, so for the Parent Plus loan, which has a little bit of less favorable terms, or even private loans through other institutions, guess what? They'll allow you to borrow up to the cost of attendance. The challenge is those are also the most undesirable loans. So what we want to try and avoid is people having to take on 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12% interest rates to fund college. That's the ultimate goal.
Yeah.
I don't think it's to avoid student loan debt entirely.
Sure.
It's to avoid punitive,
the worst kind.
In our view, the worst
kind of the worst, or just you have this, which you have these student loans balances when you graduate, and it's like the bill comes due, and you're still dealing with getting started in life. I mean, you're getting started in life. Maybe haven't really had a real job, might have done an internship here or there, but you're trying, most likely getting on a starting salary, and you're trying to find, you don't want to have to move back home with, mom and dad. Mom and dad probably don't want them moving back home, and so there's all those factors. But this has been great. I mean, this is, ultimately what spurred the conversation today was the fact that, I tend to look at things very much from a financial perspective, and Elizabeth was saying, hey, it's not all about that, and it isn't. The college experience is something that should be considered, but my take is that that's not the horse that should drive the cart. What do you think?
Well, I think it's important to make sure you're at the right school, given the experience you want to have. It's important to what we would call kind of career cruising, where you're getting an opportunity to see what some industries are like, visit some businesses, what type of career do you want to have? Because I do ultimately think
it's not just about the football team.
It's just not about the football team, or this really kind of stings too. Well, my friends are all going here.
Oh yeah.
So I'm going here, and that kind of,
that's
tough. That's tough because this is really setting you up for the rest of your life. To have a career where you can be financially stable and thrive. Right. And so we don't want to make that decision because, the high school friends are all going here. But ultimately what we see, and I think what has really motivated us to want to talk about it, is this is really one of the last major financial hurdles before your own retirement. Right. It's an expensive process. We want to get it right so that you can ultimately be set up financially to make sure that, hey, when you're ready to stop working, you're ready, that you're financially capable.
Roger that. Well, we hope you found this conversation useful. Please don't hesitate to like or subscribe to the channel. We've got more good stuff coming your way. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you soon.